Auction Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Miner. Joined with me is my boys as usual. Oh, Mark Shue, Adam Seagal. What's going on, gentlemen?
Not much, man. Here in the middle of summer, waiting for training camp to get started. We're a little over a week away, so that's what I'm waiting for. Waiting for football to come back.
Aren't we all? Aren't we all? Adam, how about you? How you doing, bud?
Yeah, same here. I hope everyone had a fantastic 4th of July.
Yeah, like my
I spent
daughter.
most of it. Go ahead.
My daughter's party just keeps on going. It doesn't end. Her birthday was on Thursday, and we celebrated it that day. And then Saturday, and it's still going on. Like, I just did turn 13. I'm like, yeah, we know, but she's worth it. It's fun.
My 4th of July weekend was mostly just cleaning out my house before I go on vacation next week. Tying up the last odds and ends, that kind of thing, and doing some much needed late spring cleaning.
Oh yeah, the late spring cleaning becomes early fall cleaning. Like,
That
we don't
too.
need that anymore either.
I've pushed it all the way to early fall, and sometimes I just push it to next year. So it's I know all too well how to do that.
All right, guys, be sure to follow me at Ryan_FFB. Follow Adam at Always Auctions, and don't forget to follow Mark Shue at Primetime Mocks. Also, follow the show, FF Auction Pod. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to hit them below in the comments, or also email us at absoluteauctionpod@gmail.com. Also, we're part of the FF Faceoff Sports or Faceoff Sports Network, so be sure to visit them for all your fantasy football needs at fffaceoff.com. All right, guys. There's a lot of fun stuff going on right now, right? Adam, I just came out with my auction strategy article, so be sure to visit the website. So anyone that ever wants to try auction, I give you a nice basic run through from beginning to end. How to start, how to build it, how to execute it. Also, Adam's the thing I've been waiting for all summer long, the world famous AAV. Adam, third year of this, the most accurate AAV out there. I'm not bragging about it. I'm stating facts here, folks. If you're not following Adam, this is from real actual auction data that we get. This isn't what Sleeper thinks or Yahoo or ESPN. This is real values at real time. Adam, go ahead and take it away. Talk more about it.
Yeah, so this is the third straight year that I've kind of spearheaded this project, and what I've tried to do is, and let me go ahead and pull up the dashboard here so folks can see it. What I really tried to do is, like you said, Ryan, gather the most accurate AAV data available for auction drafters, since most fantasy sites that put out AAV pretty much just convert their ADP data into AAV using an algorithm. And each time that we get a new mock that's completed, the data, which, like you said, comes from real users, the data is updated. And I really hope that the auction community finds this helpful. You can actually go through and choose your positions if you want to sort through specific positions. For example, you could do I just want to take a look at wide receivers, since that's what I think we're going to be talking about today. And then you can scroll down and then choose your league type, whether you're a single QB league or super flex, and it'll bring up all the appropriate data that corresponds to the positions and your league type. And you can scroll through all the different guys, all the different players that have been mocked. And if you scroll down even further, which I'm trying to do right now, there we go. There is a handy little graph right here at the bottom. You can choose a player or two, and it'll actually track that player's AAV over time. So it's a great tool. Like I said, the data is from real mock drafts, from real users. This isn't anything that I've just come up with out of the blue. It's super helpful, and like I said, I really hope the auction community uses it and finds it extremely helpful.
Yeah, looking at it, so you have the player, the team, the position, the average value.
Yep.
And then on top of that, what's even better yet, because a lot of people might say, I'm going to say Drew Davenport hates AAV because he thinks it's not true. But with what we offer at Faceoff Sports Network is the min that a player's gone for and the max they've also gone for. So you even get to see that range to give you a better understanding. So if a player is, like right now, Terry McLaurin, his average AAV is $9.25. But the max he's ever gone for in any of our drafts was $14, and the minimum was $7. So you kind of get a nice broad band range of values on some players. Like I saw that one with Christian McCaffrey at 86 at the peak. So,
yeah,
knowing your league, man, that's going to be a idea to kind of to me that's more helpful than the auction value to kind of look at the range to see the minimax, because that nomination point right there is huge. Like, what time was that player nominated at? Was it 5 picks in? Was it 30 picks in? And that's what I heard. That's other data that we're possibly also looking into getting.
Yeah, I mean, I'm constantly trying to improve and update this. So if anyone out there is watching and wants to have any suggestions on what we could potentially add, I'd be absolutely open to it.
Now, I did have one person ask about, because it's based on $200 value, about having a drop-down box where it can adjust your own league, and you kind of have like the algorithm. Like this guy asked me, it was a $600 league. He said, I have Patrick Mahomes. You show him at, we'll just say, $25 in the $600 league. What's he really worth?
Right. Yeah. No, that's a great idea. I mean, it's something that I can definitely look into. I don't know if we'll be able to do it for this year, but it's certainly something that we can look into for next year. Absolutely.
Mark, what's your thoughts about the AAV here?
No, I love it as a resource for sure. I mean, again, it's a guide, right? It's not going to be predictive of how your room is going to react to the and how the market is going to be set. If wide receivers start going for more than they're worth, or higher than normal, it's just naturally going to have an elevated top, and then you might find some values at the bottom. Sometimes it might go the other direction. But what I like about the AAV is the draft position over time, or the draft value over time. So it allows you to really kind of see where every kind of plot point where you might see them drafted. What's a good what's a good deal? What's a not so good deal? And when you're looking at a few other players, you might see all their values kind of go up and down, and you might be able to say, okay, well, this is what it looks like if we're in an inflated wide receiver market. This is what it looks like if we're in a deflated wide receiver market.
Right. And it's perfect too, because it shows you the ups and downs. And that's my favorite part of this trend, is you see the ups and downs of players based on the data of the draft. So it's not a hard, it's like, like one I always use, like CBS, they'll have like a hard value. They just give you the value of what they would be willing to pay, where here you get the true value of seeing the actual real up and down values. Like right now we have Puka Nacua and Drake London in comparison. Their ranges are quite a bit different, but the graph's very similar, which is quite weird.
Yeah.
Right. So if you value them kind of equally, like if you're looking at that third plot point where it seems like they went for an equal price, but if you're looking at, looks like Drake London's value, he can go for much cheaper. So if you're into Drake London, I'm not particularly into Drake London, but if you were into Drake London and you saw that you can get him, if you value him as close to Puka as that third plot point sort of suggests, you still might be able to find him at a cheaper price in your auction coming up.
Yeah, especially like with today's episode about wide receivers, I love it. Like this is one episode I was actually looking really forward to doing. And Adam, you came out with an awesome tweet this morning. Like, it took me forever to read it because you put so much time and effort into it, and so much data points that were into it. It was, I mean, it's definitely a good mind bender of how we should value these certain players. Take it away with what you were working on this morning.
Yeah, so there's been just a ton of buzz this offseason about ambiguous wide receiver rooms. And I was really interested in looking closely into a few situations in particular. and really what the data shows. And like I said, I posted a really long thread about it this morning. You can find it on my Twitter profile, so please go check it out. But in essence, you really want to focus on targeting wide receivers who consistently see playing time in both single and 2 wide receiver formations. And I really went deep down the rabbit hole on this one. It's super, super interesting what the data shows. I only looked at 3 different wide receiver rooms. I looked at Houston's, Green Bay's, and Seattle's. And if anyone is out there who wants me to, look into another potentially crowded wide receiver room and see what the data shows, I'd be happy to do that. Super interesting, and I really hope that people just take the time to read it and let me know what you think.
Yeah, because it was great. Like, you had, like, the wide receivers, their AAVs also on top of that, so it can kind of give a broad point of how much each of these players are going for. Right. And then, like, your true fact point, with percentages of line up in 3 wide receiver sets and 2 wide receiver sets. And it's just, it really has you like mind boggled, especially like Jayden Reed. That's like, that one sounded like, I was like, oh man, I can't wait to draft him this year. Now I'm looking at it and I'm like, I don't know if I really want to draft him anymore. Yeah. I'm thinking about going down that rabbit hole of, Dontavian Wicks or something like that now.
Yeah, I was really surprised. I mean, Jayden Reed is, as I say in the thread, he's consistently the first Packers wide receiver being drafted. He's the most expensive in auctions. But yet the data shows he was pretty much regulated to only being used in 3 wide receiver sets. He wasn't on the field really at all in 2 or single wide receiver sets. So, he's not someone that's going to be seeing the field, super consistently. If the Packers tend to run, if they choose to run more, 2 wide receiver sets this coming season, Reed's probably not going to see the field that much. And really the same thing goes for the Texans and the Seahawks. It really is crucial to target the guys who stay on the field in single and 2 wide receiver sets. And really what I want to explore next going forward is the frequency of how often these teams are actually running these single, double, and triple wide receiver sets, and how that really impacts the wide receivers and how that impacts us as fantasy drafters and who we should be targeting based on the data.
Yeah. I almost like to see it just like in tight, like I almost want to do like a tight end one, like with like 11 and 12 personnel, just if that even affects, the wide receivers and the other way based on those lineups. Because I mean, it looked like, what team was it? Am I thinking of that was looking at their lineup in 11 or 12 personnel? We'll say like the Patriots, people are trying to fall in like with Javon Baker and the other wide receivers there. But you have, Hunter Henry, and you have another tight ends there, and that one could be double tights. So that's another thing to also look into.
Yeah. No, I'm thoroughly invested into looking to this. It's super interesting, and I'm gonna try and post another big thread about it next week, about personnel tendency and just how it affects fantasy drafters and who we should be targeting based on how these teams are running their wide receiver sets.
Right. Yeah. Oh my gosh. I'm already looking forward to it next week now. All right, Mark, you are, I almost like to call you like tier god, because the way you build your tiers, it's like music to my ears. I mean, I understand you're a music teacher, but the way you like say it, man, it just flows off your tongue so well. And like, as we talk about wide receivers here, like, I feel like with most leagues being PPR, the wide receiver position itself is like the most important position. And I'm not only just saying that, but also seeing it in our mocks, even with you two, mocking with you two, like how important the wide receivers are. And then like today, I was on our Auction Pod account on Twitter, and this popped up. Sleeper. Who would you rather have in fantasy this season, CeeDee Lamb or Tyreek Hill? And the funny thing is, I said both if you play in auctions. I looked up the AAV real quick, did a quick average. You could have that for 50% of your budget. So if you have 50% of your budget laid out to go to 2 wide receivers, then you're on par. But that'd be like a good like heavy wide receiver approach. And that's what we're gonna kick off with right now is heavy wide receivers. Mark, How happy are you with heavy wide receiver approach?
Well, I mean, for me, I feel like most of the formats that are commonly played here in fantasy land are friendly to drafting wide receiver heavy. A lot of leagues, modern leagues, are playing 3 wide receivers, PPR, and on top of it, the flex position, is often preferred to be a wide receiver. I think, general consensus would say that you're preferring a wide receiver in that flex spot. And now we're having leagues that have 2 flex spots or super deep leagues. All that kind of lends itself to having a little more stability in wide receivers. Now there are a lot of them, but you have to start a lot of them, right? So if you have a good talented wide receiver core, you're often you can't really go wrong, when you're building your nucleus, to the point where I've got 3 or 4, or again, if it's one of those 2 flex leagues or a super flex, a deeper league, I might have 5 in my nucleus, and still feel okay. Now 5 is a stretch, but I think 3 or 4 is not bad, and I have a hard time seeing myself build a nucleus with at least 2, unless I'm looking at maybe a super flex league.
See, there's that word, man. Nucleus. I love it. Here, building the nucleus. Adam, you're definitely
got it. You have to,
dude. Yeah, like Adam, I know you're huge into building this. So you do the mocks, you host them. You always start 3 wide receivers, 2 flexes.
Mm-hmm.
Looking at it, how much do you think like you should budget when doing these type of leagues when you're going wide receiver heavy?
Yeah, I mean, in the recent mock drafts that we've done, I've been allocating around 35% of my budget, again, out of $200. So about 35% of my budget on my first 2 wide receivers and another 10% on my third. And I've been really pleased with the results. And I think whether your league has, just 1 or multiple flex spots, targeting wide receivers for your flex positions, like Mark said, especially in a PPR league, is really crucial. I am a firm believer that you should really make wide receiver the core and strength of your team. Basically because this approach ensures that you'll have consistent point production, but it also maximizes your roster's potential for high scoring weeks. That's what you want.
Yeah. So like when you're like building a wide receiver heavy, are you aiming for the top type of wide receivers, or are you looking to more like, I'll drop down to say, Brandon Ayuk as, being my number 1 wide receiver? Mark, how far in your nucleus are you willing to go down before you say like, all right, now we're starting to tap wide receiver 2 territory?
Okay, so this is, I think, just to first answer the first question, just about how your strategy is built. I think it actually really starts with how the market is set early on and what those top end platinum tier players are going. Right now, we're looking at CeeDee Lamb, Tyreek Hill, Jamar Chase, those kind of guys, Justin Jefferson, are all in that top end. And sometimes they'll go for mid 40s, sometimes they'll go for over 50. Sometimes CeeDee Lamb will go for well over 50, and kind of once that's kind of set, those upper levels are set, you can make your way around that. But you can also maybe try and find, like, one strategy I had when we did a mock a few weeks ago is I had the number 1 slot and I threw AJ Brown out there. AJ Brown is the one of the last 2 players in my elite tier, my platinum tier, and so I said, I ended up bidding 36 and winning the bid at 36. And that was me kind of saying, like, okay, you either are going to value him the way you value all these other guys, or you're going to have to wait to spend your money on those other guys. And that allowed me to actually get both of my last 2 elite tier players, and that was Puka and AJ Brown. And that build ended up really good for me. But also, if all those players get too expensive, I have no problem, and this is this week's 1 quarterback mock that kind of happened, is I had no problem going down into my gold tier, which I've got 19 players that I kind of consider candidates for the top 15. You know, they might be low end wide receiver ones, high end wide receiver twos. Where if I can get a nucleus of maybe 3 of those guys, and they'll probably go in that mid $20s to $30 range. If I can get a really nice nucleus off of those 3, you know, and only spend $65-$70 for those 3, I'm feeling pretty good as well.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. Oh my god, yeah! If you can spend that kind of money, that team, you could actually build a pretty balanced team at that rate. Especially if it turns out, you know, you get a really good tight end, you get 2 good running backs. Heck, you even continue on with your flex wide receivers. But yeah, that one made me mad a couple weeks ago when I saw you get AJ Brown for that cheap. I was like, man, that's not fair.
But it's not going to happen every time either. And, you know,
No.
like it's not going to be a thing that happens all the time. And, you know, sometimes you're just going to end up paying up for CD or Tyreek and paying $48 or whatever it ends up being for those guys. And that's your anchor. But then you still fill in with maybe, you know, 1 or 2 of your gold tier players. And then, you know, it works its way out from there. It just kind of, again, it's how you want to spend your money, right? That's the whole deal. If a certain thing works out, like that strategy I had, you know, getting those mid-tier wide receivers that I kind of think is second, third round guys that may have first round potential if everything breaks right. I felt good about that because I ended up also, you know, getting Jahmyr Gibbs for a price that I thought was cheaper than expected. So, you know what I mean? Like I got Jahmyr Gibbs for $38 and I was like, okay, I don't really like going hero RB. I'm willing to go 0 RB. But okay, Jahmyr Gibbs is my first round pick, and then I'm just going to get all these guys and see if that works. And if you spend the money right, there's, you know, it wasn't just me who was getting those deals in that $25 to $30 range. There was, you know, a half dozen more guys. There was DK Metcalf out there. There was Jalen Waddle. There were players that I wasn't getting that was still in that range that you can still feel good about if you have a nice platoon of players. And you know, if you're willing to pass up that elite tier wide receiver because, you know, the value is somewhere else at the top.
Well, and I loved it too, the way you put it together also, you know, you didn't just aim at the top, you know, you aimed at the bottom of your golden tier list, like your wide receiver ones that, you know, could be wide receiver ones. You went to the very back end of it to see if you get that player or to see what kind of range was, because it's, you know, everyone's going to get CD Lamb out there right off the bat. He's going to go high, you know, and it's just going to drop down the list from there, and people are starting to bid up and up and up. But like if you go to the back end of that tier, I've noticed more and more lately that you actually get tremendous value on those players, and then you can actually build a better nucleus, like a better team around your own team there, where you can say, oh my god, no, I budgeted $46 for my wide receiver 1, I got him for $36, I got $10 more to spend. Now what do I do? You know, like at that point, Adam, you know, you feel the same way, right? Like you have that tier break where you look at the tier and you see what's in the tiers, but you don't want to be the last one chasing that tier. Like if you see one player in that tier, like what's your nomination? Like if you saw like CeeDee Lamb was the last one in that tier, how would you try to nominate it in a wide receiver? Like if you're going wide receiver heavy, would you try to go down to tier 2 or tier 3? How would you approach that?
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on how the draft is shaking up. I mean, like Mark said, CeeDee Lamb's going to be probably, you know, in this year's fantasy draft, CeeDee Lamb's probably going to be one of, if not potentially the first wide receiver nominated. I mean, looking back at our draft, I went super wide receiver heavy in our latest 1 quarterback mock. I spent $114 on my 3 wide receivers. I got Jamar Chase, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and Stephon Diggs for $114. And so I just loaded up with wide receivers. And plus I got some really good flex options too. I was able to get Godwin, Deontay, and Hopkins for another like 37. So I went really wide receiver heavy. I spent the majority of my budget on wide receivers. But again, in a PPR league that you're playing with multiple flex spots, wide receivers are that much more valuable. I tried to employ another 0 RB draft, and I was pretty happy. I got Tony Pollard and Jonathan Brooks for $19, and I spent $8 on Dak Prescott as my starting quarterback. So I felt really good about this team and this build. Like I said, if you're playing in a PPR league, you've got multiple flex spots. Target wide receivers. They're more consistent. They stay on the field more, and I think it's just going to lead to better results for your team.
So basically, going wide receiver heavy and bodes zero RB strategy.
Mm-hmm.
To sum it up in a nice, easy way. Because, I mean, if you're not getting one of the top tight ends, then you're not really doing anything.
Mm-hmm.
But which brings me on to my next type of strategy. Going hero wide receiver. Is this a real thing? I can understand people blowing their budgets. I've seen, the budget of Christian McCaffrey, Jamar Chase, and Travis Kelce, and they're at $160. Is that considered a hero wide receiver type of start? Because you're kind of holding yourself down, but just think how far down you have to go at that point when you go hero wide receiver.
Yeah, and I think with hero wide receiver, I think there's a reason why drafters and just fantasy players in particular, you won't find a whole lot. You won't find much, if really any, advice online regarding the strategy, unless you play in a league with really shallow rosters. I wouldn't advise employing this type of roster build. Wide receivers are typically more consistent than running backs. Like I said, they stay on the field more, and especially with the NFL now having really transitioned to being so pass happy, I don't think wide receiver is a position that you can potentially afford to be frugal with.
Right, I kind of agree, and maybe again, if it's a shallow league, if it's a 2 wide receiver league with 1 flex, maybe, because you can wait a few rounds. If that's the case, you can wait a few rounds and maybe get some wide receivers that that are on that, that can be your wide receiver 2 on a budget, or your flex on a budget. But the thing that you also have to remember is that, because we have so many positions to fill at wide receiver, that the pressure never comes off. There's no one's taking their foot off the gas pedal. Once you get past your nucleus and into that second third of the draft, where you're sort of getting your flex positions, your early bench players, your depth, what have you, you still need to be drafting wide receivers probably. You're going to need players for bye weeks, and you're not going to want to get a wide receiver off the waiver wire. It's pretty hard to get a wide receiver off of the waiver wire. I think it's easier to find running backs and tight ends than it is to find wide receivers that are going to stick on your roster in that regard, save Puka Nacua. But, really, I think the pressure doesn't come off, So, you still need, going back to the draft this week, I still needed $16 to land T. Higgins and 13 for Hollywood Brown, to finish out really what ended up being my 2 flex spots. So you can't stop. If you're gonna be the person who goes hero wide receiver, once you get past 2 or 3 picks, it's gonna be really difficult to not continue drafting them, because you do need somebody, and you don't want to be left with it being, a crapshoot.
Yeah, it happens. And like I said, I seen the hero wide receiver go, and then that guy sat there for the draft, for basically the whole draft, because he spent all his money on it. It wasn't even worth it in the long run. And the funny thing is too, as we've already discussed, how most leagues are already going PPR. Would you guys still have the same approach even half PPR?
I think I would. Well. I think I would.
Or is that lean more towards the pass catching running backs?
I mean, pass catching running backs have value, obviously. I mean, they have value in PPR leagues too. It's why it's why Christian McCaffrey is as valuable as he is. But yeah, I think for the most part, I actually don't change my strategy that much. I will, if there are guys that I know are bigger possession receivers, I might give them a little bit of a boost, but it doesn't overall change my tiers. It might bump them up within the tier, but it probably won't change the tier that they're in, if that makes sense. So I'm still I think it probably makes you just a little bit more aggressive in your targeted players, maybe. But I think the strategy overall is pretty much the same between half and full PPR.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah, and then brings us into our last one, and I thought it was just a funny one because we heard zero RB, a zero wide receiver strategy. Is that even a real thing? Because I mean, in all honesty, I've never seen it. I've never done it. I don't know who's ever done it, and I'd be curious to see how far down you have to go to basically start zero wide receiver. I mean, is that basically like getting high end wide receiver threes on their own teams? But then like Adam had the wide receivers thing about the wide receiver threes, and I'm like, oh boy, now I don't want JSN or players like that.
For auction standard, I would say that probably means like, I don't even know if I could say it's your sixth, right? Like I couldn't be your sixth player probably. It would have to be like maybe your fifth most expensive player and down. I mean, like if you're doing six, I mean zero wide receiver, it's a zero win strategy. I mean,
you're basically looking at you're looking at high upside players. Like you could say like Tyler Lockett, Ladd McConkey, Jameson Williams, Keon Coleman, Mike Williams. These guys that no one wants, or Brandon Cooks. Some of that no one really wants as their starter, but it's just like, to me, it'd be like a best ball strategy if you just wanted to say like I just want to go all in on running backs and tight ends and quarterback and worry about my wide receiver later.
Right. Yeah, I think you can do it, but,
go ahead,
but like we said with running back, is it comes with volatility, right? Like you have to hit on those players. Where a wide receiver, you obviously need to hit on the players as well, but like for the most part, like there's they're playing in 2 and 3 wide receiver sets. They're going to be on the field. They're going to be running routes. They're going to be commanding targets on some level as long as they're healthy. And it's, again, if you have a running back, you're going to have to help. You're going to have to hope that they're not going to get hurt. You have to do the same thing with every player. But again, I'm a little more nervous with running backs, especially ones that have some sort of injury history or anything like that. So, it starts to thin out the players I'm willing to spend money on. Whereas, as long as a wide receiver's hamstring is doing pretty well heading into the season, I'm fine drafting him and letting him, run routes for me.
Yeah, and that's a good one too. Like, look at the injury wide receivers. Like, yeah, you might get a discount value on them, but they don't help you when they're on your bench.
Yeah, they're not doing pass protection. They're not, they're not doing all that extra stuff that's like gonna get you hurt.
No, like it's almost like it's like a Deebo Samuel. Everyone's like, they see him run the ball and they just cringe, but it's like that can turn into a 6-yard play and a touchdown, or he gets hit in the backfield and then he's laying there for a minute.
Yeah, so there are certain leagues, and I don't play in any of these, but there are certain leagues that give points for like just how many rushes a running back gets, or if they get a first down, and if they get a first down on top of their rushing yards. There are leagues that do give bonuses for running backs. In that instance, I could see someone trying to go, zero wide receiver and really focusing and really hammering those running backs. Again, I don't play in those types of leagues, but they do exist. So that would be the only situation that I could see that I would even suggest potentially trying to go zero wide receiver. But other than that,
Probably zero wide receiver, but probably good for like touchdown only leagues where, you just get touchdowns. You don't get any yards or any catches, anything like that. It's just touchdowns.
Yep.
Yeah, I can get with that. I mean, if we were still playing standard league, non PPR as the industry standard, I would say, yeah, sure. I'm less. I might take less wide receivers early on. I might go for that high end running back more often. But right now with PPR and again, how far we're stretching these leagues out, I would say that it's hard to get behind. There are a lot of if then scenarios with just about every running back. So,
and plus, like with the new scoring change in the NFL of punt and kick returners being more valuable, like the wide receiver position is just bolstered with richness. So like it gets even super deep. So if you can even add punt and kick return yardage to your league settings and give it a whole additional twist to make wide receivers even more valuable. But overall, it looks like we are huge on the heavy wide receiver approach, as I like to see at least get 1 or 2 top-end wide receivers if I can, at least 2 top 12s, depending on, once again, how the draft's going, how my budget's coming along, how the values are. If we can all like trip on the values like Mark did with AJ Brown, that's great. And then just put the freaking peanut butter on the jelly and just throw that all together and get Puka Nacua with it. You got me sold, man. But we can't do that in every draft because we do run these auction drafts. You can run. I think, Adam, you've had some with the same people, and I've seen so many different strategies being used.
Mm-hmm.
And so it just goes to show you that no matter how these drafts go, it always changes every time. And that's what helps with the AAV of the min and the max, because that is one useful part of that tool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like I said last week, if anyone's out there watching, they want to come and join us for a mock draft and test out your auction skills, even if you've never done an auction before, get in contact, send me a DM, reach out on Twitter, and I will be more than happy to save you a spot. There are lots of fun.
Even reach out to us, like we said earlier in the email, absolute auction podcast at gmail.com. We'll be free to, we'll help you get in that somehow that way also. We use Sleeper. It's a great platform to use. It's quick, it's fast, it's easy to get into, a lot of fun. You guys have been in the last 2. I've been busy. I've been out of it. So I got to get back into the groove, man. I'm starting to lose my mojo on it. I was itching so hard when I saw that 8:30 time. I'm like, man, everyone's gonna be here still. I'm like, I can't do it. But all right, guys, that's it. Actually, this has been a quick show. We're gonna wrap this up.
Good.
And we have a question from Joe Simonate. I think I said that right. I hope I did. Adam,
I thought it was Simonetti. But
is it Simonetti?
I don't know.
Simonetti. He'll let me know tomorrow on Twitter, I'm sure, or after he watches this or listens to it. He'll be like, yeah, you said my name wrong. I'm like, I'm pretty sure most people do. That's all right. He goes, hey, guys, I have a position already filled, running back, for example. Should I nominate other running backs to make others spend on a position I don't need, or nominate high-value players in other positions, like wide receiver or tight end, or possibly even quarterback? I've read arguments from both strategies and wonder what you all think. Adam, what's your thoughts on this?
It's a good question. I think that if you have a position already filled, definitely consider nominating high-value players in other positions. This can drive up prices and force other managers to spend more, leaving them with less to compete for positions you need. Additionally, I would also recommend keep an eye on other managers' rosters throughout your draft, and you'll probably be able to infer what strategies they're employing based on their bids and their roster composition.
How about you, Mark? Do you feel the same way? Because I feel like Adam hit the same way. I would actually kind of run that.
Yeah, I think you would consider it. I think you have to also just be prepared not to engage in the bidding, right? That's the hardest thing. Once you've filled your position, you kind of have to be okay with deals kind of passing you by, if you know what I mean. It's kind of like have you ever drafted a tight end early and then you see another tight end deal, say in a snake draft, right? You draft a tight end early or a quarterback early, and then 2 rounds later, somebody of the same tier value goes and was for a huge steal. And they're like, damn, I should have just waited and gotten that guy, right? That's gonna happen to you, I think, if you've already sort of filled a position. So I don't mind you putting it out there and only bidding at a level that you can afford that player, because you do need to make sure that you're staying on your budget and keeping the money allocated for other players at other positions that you haven't already filled and you need to attack. So you can definitely nominate, get some of that money out of the room, but I would not bid. Let's go back to this week's auction draft, right? One of the players got Mahomes for $29, And then later on, I think threw out Burrow and was bidding, got him all the way up to 12, and now he has Joe Burrow and Patrick Mahomes, and he's got Caleb Williams on his roster too for $2. So it's a one quarterback league. You've drafted Mahomes. I don't know if you particularly need a backup quarterback, right? For Mahomes going into the year. So you could have had that $14 that you spend somewhere else. So if you're going to do that strategy, just make sure that you are disciplined and aren't engaging in the action.
Absolutely. Like, don't be the price enforcer, because people are going to catch on to that. Like, if you keep trying to enforce these prices and try to bid them up on it, they're eventually just going to say, you know what, he's yours. And then you're stuck with it. And you're like, now what do I do? Because I didn't really want this player at this price, or I didn't need this position roster filled. And like, I'm going to go right back to what Adam said. You basically want to see what the other managers are doing. Like, if I have all my running backs full and I see wide receivers out there, I'll start nominating, tiers behind, 3, 4, 5 type of wide receivers. Just kind of throw some player cloggers out there. It's kind of what I like to call them. Like, I don't want to get in the high end player, but as soon as I get it out there, I know someone's going to bite on it. And then additionally with that, like, if I have my running back position filled and I see a top end running back still there, and I see money on the board, and I see the open slots, so I'm like, you know what? I'm going to get him out there, and I'm going to get that bid up there, and let's see what he goes for. And like Mark said, people are going to get values. They're going to get bargains on players. You just have to get over it. You can't just sit there and him and haw after the draft and you're like, oh man, if I would have done this, if I would have done that, oh, if I would have bid on this guy instead. It's just kind of like that. You just kind of have to let it go, as they say in Frozen.
Yeah. There's a time and a place, to account for your mistakes and how you can get better. That's true. But yeah, I mean, really, it's just kind of about the discipline. Because really, if you think about it, right, if you're employing this strategy where I filled a position, I'm going to nominate other players. You put that nomination out there, everyone sees that you've drafted 2 running backs, right? If you have, everyone's going to see that. And so you're nominating a third, your other positions aren't filled. So if they see you're bidding, or if they see you throw that out there, that's kind of a tell that you're kind of trying to drain money from the room. So if they just see you bidding and it starts to get into a place where, it's kind of on the price value, or, if it's above the price value or it's on the price value and you're going to be screwed because you spend another $24 on a running back, that's when they might say, okay, I'm going to stick it to you.
All right. Well, that's part of this question I want to ask real quick too. So say like you have plenty of money left. You don't need the position, but you have a value on this player. We'll say Kyle Pitts at $16, and he starts out $1, $2, $3. Are you going to go up there right then and there and just go 14, 15? Just to get the bid to see if anyone will bite it? Or, I mean, if you're comfortable taking them at that price, would you still do it?
Again, it would have to be by positional need. I don't like that you're using Kyle Pitts in this scenario because I'm not a believer, but
I'm a believer. That's why I said him.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you can have him for 14. Go ahead. You bid him for 14 all day. I'll let you do that. But yeah, no, I think for the most part, if your depth is filled, like you kind of, unless you're forcing them into that's the thing about like onesie positions like that, is like if you're forcing them into your flex spot, your flex spot becomes your flex spot is supposed to be flexible. If you spend that extra money on tight end, it makes that spot way more rigid. Like you're going to feel worse about not starting Kyle Pitts every week because you spent so much money on him. Well, not so much money, but you spent enough money on him that you feel obligated to kind of keep him on your roster and keep him in your flex, even if he's not performing up to what you might expect.
Adam, how about you? Are you in any type of price enforcement like that, or are you kind of just?
I mean, I think Mark hit it right on the head. I mean, if you start to, price enforce, you have the potential to be stuck with someone who you may not want, may not really, gel well with the rest of your roster. It's tricky. It's a fine line. Some people, can be super aggressive in their drafts. Some people are more laid back and just kind of like to let the draft, kind of come to them. It's a fine line. It really is. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I can really add anything. I think Mark really summed it up pretty nicely there.
It's such a good question.
Yeah, I think if you're going to price and force, it has to fit your agenda. Like
Yeah.
it has to fit like what you need to do going forward. Like you can't do something that's going to derail your plans.
All right, man. That was good. Good question, Joe. Thanks a lot for that one. That was definitely longer than I thought we were actually going to talk about it, but we basically hit every viewpoint of it. So we didn't. I don't think we missed anything on that question. Anything else, guys?
And send more to the email.
Even feel free to hit him up in the comments below. You know, we'll answer them. We'll get back on here. We'll jump on. We can even bring them up next week if we need to.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, guys.
AbsoluteOptionPod@gmail.com.
Yeah, there we go. All right, hit up Adam's AAV. Hit up my auction strategy piece over at fffaceoff.com. Guys, episode 5 is now complete. For Mark, Adam, and myself, this is the Absolute Auction Podcast. We'll see you guys next week.